more than this. The stunting issue already taught, over 40% of children stunted, absolute number calculated, and it is mimics the difference between provinces, between some of the districts. You may be surprised to see a district with stunting rate of up to 60%, 58%, even in GB area. So it is huge issues. Stunting is one of the indicators. When we see low birth weight, which is a proxy indicator of maternal status, Adnan Sab already mentioned, maternal nutrition, maternal health, we have 23% nationally, some provinces up to 50%. Those children, even before they are born, they are already wasted, they are already stunted. You see, an investment in maternal adolescent girls is needed. 56% of adolescent girls are anemic. We have 25 million children out of school, half of them are adolescent girls. Unless we bring them to school, keep them in school, and make sure they get adequate social service, including health and education, will not be addressed the stunting issue and will not be addressed the broader national development issue. So from that angle, the physical space is disproportionately affecting the social sector, among them the health, education, and nutrition as well. As the climate shock already mentioned, the official development assistance shrinking globally, it has been already mentioned, it is going to shrink, that is an evidence. We don't know what tomorrow will bring, but the whole world has faced the biggest global crisis, and that is going to affect us. We have already seen, if I'm not mistaken, the data, Pakistan is receiving less than $2 billion for climate financing, against the needs of up to 50 billion per year. Will this huge difference, Pakistan will be on track to attain the sustainable development sustainable development goal is the biggest question for all of us. But obviously this is going to affect particularly children, communities in the remote and district with multiple deprivations. Overall, UNICEF regards public financing for children as one of the most powerful drivers of sustainable development. So through our public financing for children initiative, both at national and provincial level, thanks to our team at a different level, we are working with the government to conduct child-focused budget analysis and expenditure tracking. We are strengthening capacities for performance-based budgeting, while also collaborating to introduce child budget tagging systems to monitor allocation across key sectors, mainly education, health, nutrition, and social protection. These are key sectors which are important for early childhood development. This model, the public financing for children, has been adopted in more than 17 countries across the world. If we pick a couple of examples, for example, in Indonesia, UNICEF partnered and supported the government of Indonesia to institutionalize budget tagging for children across government ministries, enhancing both efficiency and transparency. Dr. Sajid has already mentioned, we need to have a different ways of thinking on how to optimize even the existing resources. It is some of the examples we can learn from other countries as well. Second, in Jordan, collaboration with the Ministry of Finance led to the introduction of result-based budgeting, directly linking social expenditure to tangible improvement in child well-being. This is the first time I am in a meeting with an advisor from Ministry of Finance, listening to those recommendations. It is one of the biggest motivation for all of us working in human development areas, and taking lessons from other countries like Jordan. As I said, the role Ministry of Finance plays in resource allocation is huge, but when we use it systematically, I think it is very effective. We don't need to advocate anymore, particularly in Pakistan, because that was a comment we have come through. In Ghana, the monitoring of social spending contributed to a 12% rise in primary education allocation. So these are a couple of examples from other countries, which demonstrates that even in tight physical environment, financing approach grounded in robust data, and most important, on commitment to quality can achieve maximum impact. We are also looking into innovative financing, as Dr. Sajid already mentioned. This is looking into innovative financing mechanisms that can blend not only public financing, but also private and philanthropic financing that can bring an efficiency to different perspectives. A couple of examples on this area is, for example, in India, UNICEF partnered with private investors on the Skill Impact Bond, which has enhanced employability for more than 50,000 young women. So the impact, not only financing, but also contribution in terms of women empowerment is huge. In Argentina, a social impact bond provided performance-based funding for early childhood development. In the Philippines, UNICEF contributed for development of climate adaptation bond to support resilient schools and water infrastructure. When we see, listening to the previous speaker's notes and the lesson from other countries, in Pakistan, we are also not that much far. There are good progresses. For example, if you have seen the mixed multiple indicator cluster survey 2024 in Punjab, Punjab has reduced stunting to 27% for the first time. It is huge things. There are lessons even from Pakistan. BISP, there are colleagues from BISP. If you have seen the impact evaluation, there is a reduction in stunting among the BISP beneficiaries and other child, neonatal, and health indicators as well. So overall, there are global lessons we can bring to Pakistan. There are also lessons within Pakistan that we can take it further, but link it into robust data commitment and looking into innovative financing as well. We are also in Pakistan, as previous speaker mentioned, we are exploring collaborations under the social impact financing framework and the sustainable investment Sukuk initiative with aims that ensure innovative financial instruments that include green, social, and Sukuk bonds are accessible, transparent, inclusive, and prioritize the needs of children. So overall, as we need to move forward, we need a new compact of financing for children, which is, as Dr. Sajid is looking, mentioned already. This compact is a compact that brings the different sectors together, not only one, but also the private, the public, and the philanthropy together towards a shared vision. This is also a compact that must put social protection, education, nutrition, health at the very heart, not at the periphery. We have also evidences, particularly investment in the early life, that tells us the best investment in a return. An investment in $1 will give us an investment up to $13 return through improvement in productivity, reducing in cost, as the same line improving in health outcomes as well. As I conclude, and I appreciate the participation of all, I will request all of us to redefine sustainable financing, not merely as an accounting concept, but as an investment in our children's future. Investing in children is not a luxury, as it has been said. Investing in climate change is not a luxury. It is an investment in human capital development. Physical discipline must not undermine human development. That is already mentioned. It is something I think we all of us need to be agree. Overall, wise, transparent, and a fair investment today will be a key backbone for better Pakistan's tomorrow and for better children in Pakistan. With that, I stop. I thank you all, and I wish you all the best, counting on UNICEF continuous engagement and partnership with the government of Pakistan. Thanks.
Thank you, Tariq. Thank you very much, Anthony, for the renewed commitment to the human capital, especially the stunting agenda, and also updating us on the global experience and the work that has been done across different governments on the implementation of these or addressing these challenges. With this, we will move to the panel discussion, and I think we have a very, very solid stage set out for the panelists. We started looking at some very structural sort of issues in the macroeconomic landscape of the country, the issues around debt servicing, our external liabilities, our social sector investments, and how that's influencing the overall envelope. Then we sort of heard from Dr. Pasha on some very, very promising and forward-looking opportunities which are out there, which need a lot more new thinking and innovation to be implemented or to be leveraged. We also heard from Anthony on the global experiences and how best using or localizing some of the solutions could help us drive the impact. I think this sets us to move forward to Dr. Ambrina Bakhtiar, Chief SDGs from the Ministry of Planning, Development and Special Initiatives. Dr. Ambrina, it would be very good to hear from yourself on at least the three critical priorities which the speakers have pointed to in terms of SDGs, which speak to the framework of country partnership agreement that Dr. Pasha pointed to on education, on nutrition and climate, and what kind of innovation and efficiencies the government can bring in terms of implementation of these. Thank you very much and welcome, please.
Assalamu alaikum. Actually, Dr. Pasha has provided such a comprehensive overview that I was thinking that what I have to ask present because sir ne sab kuch keh diya. So I would start with very basic, the SDG status in Pakistan. So as you know that SDG is not only a global agenda, but it's Pakistan's national development agenda. In Pakistan, our commitment to sustainable development goal remain very strong. The shrinking fiscal space has certainly made implementation more challenging for us, but it has also encouraged us to think differently about how development is financed. So despite limited resources, we have made progress, particularly in localizing the SDG across provinces. Integrating them into national and provincial planning frameworks and strengthening our data and monitoring system. Over the year, Pakistan has made significant progress to achieve SDG. In 2016, we were reporting just only 21 SDG indicators, which improved to 133 indicator in 2020-21. And in 2020-23, we are reporting 154 indicators. And about the status of these indicators, out of 154 indicators, around 1/3 show improvement, particularly in no poverty, zero hunger, and affordable and clean energy. But 1/3 reflect decline. Unfortunately, good health, well-being, decent work, economic growth, and partnership of the goals, while other remain stagnant that include quality education. So sir talked about a lot of sustainable financing. So actually, according to World Bank report, we need approximately 17% additional financing for implementing SDG agenda. At this point of time, 10% of GDP we are spending on some main SDG goals, and we need 17% more additional financing to finance these goals. In this regard, we have Uran Pakistan program, which is our economic transformation agenda. This provides overall vision to link growth, fiscal discipline, and SDG achievement. Anchored in 5 E's: export, Pakistan, e-Pakistan, environment, energy, and infrastructure, and equity, ethic, and empowerment. It places people at the center of growth. Its equity and empowerment pillar directly support SDGs by promoting inclusion, women participation, and social protection. So Udan Pakistan initiative integrate a comprehensive range of innovative financing mechanism to mobilize non-traditional capital sources, reduce dependence on public budget, and align investment flows with national development and climate goals. So here I am just summarizing some key instrument and key specific areas of importance in Uran Pakistan program. So Uran positioned public-private partnership as a cornerstone of infrastructure development, particularly in the area of energy, transport, and connectivity sectors. The initiative commits to implementing build on operate and build on operate transfer models supported by viability gap funding to de-risk private investment. Transmission infrastructure, earlier developed solely through public sector financing, will progressively adopt private participation through competitive contracting and BOOT arrangement to enhance efficiency and reduce fiscal burden. The next, we have blended and green financing. This Udan Pakistan plan environmental and climatal change pillar calls for combining domestic fiscal sources with consensual and climate finance from global partners. Udan identified Pakistan's US $348 billion climate finance gap by 2030. So it emphasizes the use of blended instruments that mix public, seed funds, concessional lending, and private co-investment to meet long-term resilience need. Then we have Sustainable Finance Bureau and Institutional Innovation. The initiative proposes establishing a Sustainable Financing Bureau or equivalent institutional mechanism to coordinate and channel climate-related financing flow. The Bureau will serve as a central platform for mobilizing, tracking, and reporting green finance, ensuring transparency and alignment with Pakistan Climate Resilience Development Framework and Global Climate Finance Commitment. This institutional arrangement aligned with Pakistan's National Climate Finance Strategy 2020-24 to 2030, which similarly envisions a central platform for mobilizing and tracking green finance. Carbon market revenues. So Udan mechanism for monetizing carbon credits under emerging voluntary and compliance carbon markets, with the aim of channeling proceeds into national climate fund dedicated for this. And next, we have Climate Tech Fund of Funds and Innovation Finance. A proposal of $20 million Climate Tech Fund of Funds will act as catalyst vehicle to mobilize venture capital and private equity for Pakistan emerging green innovation ecosystem. The fund is designed to co-invest with private investor in clean technologies, circular economy venture, and digital solution for energy and agriculture. Then we have private participation in urban service sector PPPs. Udan infrastructure pillar prioritizes private sector participation in urban and municipal services through scalable PP model, particularly in solid waste management, wastewater treatment, and waste to energy conversion. These projects are structured around user fee and offtake backed contract to ensure commercial viability and long-term sustainability. So basically, I must say that this Udan Pakistan program provide us the area where we can finance, where we can make our financing for sustainable development. And sustainable financing framework provide how we can finance this area. At the end, I want to say that sustainable development goals are not only government agenda, but it's national agenda. So we have worked together, either it's academia, it's government, it's civil society, it's our and CSR responsibility to work together to achieve SDG agenda till 2030. Thank you.
SDGs, the practical challenges and how the government of Pakistan has defined a roadmap and certain priorities in order to deliver on that. It is also very good to see the policy alignment between the SDG financing framework, the implementation plan, and the social impact financing strategy, and of course, the Udan framework. I think, again, the challenge lies in unpacking and the sort of coordinated delivery of how all of these beautiful ventures, projects, SDG commitments fall and contribute to these big policy commitments and decisions. I think this takes us to the next speaker from Bangladesh, Professor Mustafizur Rahman. It will be very good to hear from yourself on how our neighboring country has contributed to deliver on the very important agenda of SDGs and what kind of practical implementation challenges in terms of financing the SDG are there and how these have been addressed.
Chair, uh, dear audience, my fellow panelists, uh, I'm very grateful for this opportunity to share some of my views on an issue which is so crucially important for our countries and the countries of our region. Our two scene-setting presentations have really given us a lot of information and thought, and I will draw on that. As Mr. Pasha has mentioned, money may not be a problem, but I think we should put emphasis on non-debt creating money. Because as Dr. Sajid Amin mentioned, you have been talking about Pakistan, 9% of the revenue GDP ratio is 9%. If I take Bangladesh, it is 7.7%, the revenue GDP ratio. So when you were giving the figures, I was thinking that you could put Bangladesh in place of Pakistan and you'd get the same comments. So only 7.7% of the revenue is as percentage of the GDP. So I would say that we should think about how to raise our own resources. You see, in our countries, and in case of Pakistan also, I heard 60% comes from the indirect taxes, which puts a burden on the poor people. So in Bangladesh, it is 2/3, 67%. So I think that we should really do our own homework and see why revenue GDP ratio is not, well, 9% or 7.7%. At least I can speak about Bangladesh. The revenue that the people pay to the GDP is much higher than the revenue that the government gets and the GDP ratio, isn't it? There's a lot of leakage. Our finance minister in his budget speech a few years back mentioned, I still recall, that people pay VAT, value-added tax, at 400,000 points, and the government gets only from 24,000 points, 6% of the points. So that's the huge loss that we have. I think that before going into where we should raise money overseas, we should look at our home and do the homework. And I think there is enormous opportunities of raising that, number one. And when we are borrowing, yes, we can get the money, but look, I can talk about Bangladesh, for example. Our foreign loan is about $100 billion, not much. It's 23% of our GDP. But if you look at the debt servicing, it used to be $2 billion. This year, it will be $5 billion. You see? So the cost of borrowings are going up. Both Pakistan and Bangladesh, we have graduated from low-income country to lower middle-income country. And we are no longer eligible exclusively. We are no longer eligible exclusively for the concessional window. World Bank will not give us IDA loan, as they used to give, less than 1% of interest rate. All the borrowings that we are now incurring, interest rate is more than 3.5%. It's 4%, 5%. You go for LIBOR or SOFR plus 1 and it becomes 6%. Okay, so the debt servicing burden is increasing. So that's why I think when we talk about bridging the gap, we should find out where to raise our own resources, taxing the people who don't pay. I think this is one. The second is, of course, efficiency of spending the money that we spend. That also have to be raised, number one. Number two, look at the global scenario. We remember that there was a promise in the 1960s and 70s that the ODA will be 0.7% of the GNI of the rich countries. It's now 0.3%. So the global architecture of financing is also changing. All the money, for example, the money that comes to Bangladesh, a lot of it is now being diverted for the Rohingya crisis. Okay. So we are not getting the money that we used to get. So this is also another problem. Just look at the Trump tariff. Our major export is apparels. Last year, import duties on our apparels in USA was $1.2 billion. And now another 20% have been added. So the total import duty in USA will be $2.6 billion. So you see, so the global architecture, the legacy banks like World Bank, IMF, the democratization of these institutions, we also have to look at the broader picture before we come into, where to raise money. So this is the second point. And obviously, of course, we should find out what are the alternative sources. As I was mentioning, there are also new banks coming up, the southern banks, South-South cooperation, the new development bank, which used to be called the BRICS Bank, or the Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank. These are also new sources that we should explore. Okay. The other is, obviously, we can issue green bonds and sukuk bonds. Some of the countries are doing global philanthropy. I will give you one example. In Bangladesh, the most popular platform of financial transaction is bKash. Okay, it's a profit enterprise, but Bill Gates, Melinda Gates Foundation took 25% of the ownership, and they brought in the money at 0 interest. And you can give the services to the poor people who transact. 70% of the rickshaw pullers in Bangladesh, they send money through bKash, this financial transfer instrument, because they can keep the cost low, because it's a blended finance. Okay. So this is one example but this is private philanthropy. The other example that we can give is the Grameen Danone food, which is a partnership with the French Danone company, which came up with the seed money with the Grameen Bank. And Professor Yunus, our chief advisor, he negotiated, and we can give our children yogurt, fortified yogurt at very low cost, because that money came at 0 interest rate. So there are obviously, some of the opportunities that we can explore. But I would like to conclude by saying that many of our countries will fall into debt trap, because all these monies are borrowed money and very high cost money. That is what really worries me. We can have the access to the money, but if we don't spend them in a judicious way, number one, and number two, many of these spent money will give the returns at a later stage. If we invest in our children, they will be skilled workers, productivity will go up, our profitability would go up, we will export more, but it will take time. So in the meantime, if we fall into a debt trap, then obviously, there is no coming out of it. Most of the developing countries are either in the lower middle income trap, or in the upper middle income trap. In our region, you can see examples after examples, not to speak about Latin America, where most of them are in the upper middle income trap. And most of these traps are synonymous with debt trap. So I think that we should also talk about democratization of the global financial institutions. We should talk about what promises have been made in SDG 17, public-private partnership, nothing coming out of it. What has been promised in the COP28, COP29, and now in Belém, Brazil, there will be COP30. So damages done by other countries, but we are having to borrow money at high interest rate, and in the process could fall into debt trap. Is it a sustainable model? I would like to leave with that comment. Thank you.
Countries like Pakistan and Bangladesh is to sort of look at the in-house discipline, the physical discipline and looking at the efficiencies and accountabilities and transparencies around public resourcing, which is very critical to deliver on the human capital agenda, which we all share. Thank you for also pointing to the global aid architecture and limitations of that architecture and how that's impacting the poor and low middle income countries and what kind of future implication it holds. So thank you very much for that. And it's very heartening to know the examples from the Big Cash and Grameen Bank and how that can be leveraged for countries who are facing similar issues. I think with this, we also have a very sort of promising and refreshing options which are out there. And as Dr. Pasha also rightly mentioned, that there have some of the impact bonds which have been materialized. So I think it will be important to hear on them as well. I would like to invite Mateen Farooq Saab from the Bank of Punjab. He's the head of investment banking. And sir, we would like you to please touch upon the Pakistan's current regulatory framework for implementing such innovative financing instruments. And in your thinking, how do you think the impact bond can be a model that ensures equitable performance risk sharing with private investors?
Am I audible enough for everyone?
We can hear you.
Sure. Thank you. First of all, thank you to SDPI and UNICEF for organizing this important and timely discussion. It is my pleasure to be part of such a distinguished panel, even though unfortunately I could not be there in person in Islamabad today. My apologies for that. I'm joining you virtually from Karachi, but I'm very glad to contribute to this dialogue, and I'll do my best to do justice to this discussion. I'll keep my discussion very specific to the topics that you have mentioned, Mr. Duff. So first of all, to set the context, Pakistan's fiscal space is under tremendous pressure. We all know that. Traditional public financing alone simply cannot keep pace with our development ambitions, whether that is expanding access to healthcare and education, building climate resilience, or skilling our youth for the future. This is where alternative finance becomes vital. Models that blend public, private, and philanthropic capital to fund measurable outcomes rather than simply financing activities. One of the most promising examples is the Pakistan Skill Impact Bond, or PSIB, which is the country's first outcome-based financing instrument. The PSIB is designed to fix a long-standing imbalance in traditional public-private partnerships, where the public sector often ends up shouldering the losses whenever projects fall short of their targets. In this model, the risk is shared more equitably, where the investors provide the upfront funding. Outcome funders, such as government or donors, pay only when results are independently verified. And financial institutions like us, BOP, serve as structuring intermediaries, ensuring transparency, accountability, and investor confidence. So if the outcomes in such a model are not met, investors generally obviously lose their capital. If they are achieved, they receive a return. So it is a complete inversion of the traditional PPP model prevalent in Pakistan, especially in power sectors and other areas. So we are now targeting to move from funding efforts to financing verified success. Fortunately, Pakistan's regulatory environment is evolving to support this transition. The State Bank of Pakistan has taken progressive steps through its green banking guidelines and Pakistan Green Taxonomy, which define what constitutes green activities. Similarly, I understand that SECP has also introduced a framework for green and gender bond issuance and integrated ESG principles into corporate governance standards. Together, these initiatives have given financial institutions the license to operate in the sustainable finance space. This means moving forward beyond the conventional role of lenders to becoming mobilizers of private capital for public outcomes. At the Bank of Punjab specifically, we are positioning ourselves as a structuring and syndication partner, bringing together government, DFIs, philanthropies, and private investors within blended finance platform. As Adnan Saab said, the PSIB itself is an excellent example of this collaboration, where the government of Pakistan, the British Asian Trust, our colleague from BAT is also here, and private funders are working together to create a new model of social financing. This approach enables the government to shift from a pair of inputs to a pair of success, reducing fiscal burden while also improving efficiency and accountability. Ask us, but because this is the first ever issuance, and many people ask us whether the PSIB is just a pilot program, is it going to scale up in future or not? Well, honestly, yes, absolutely not. This is not a pilot program. It is actually a blueprint for how Pakistan can scale impact finance across multiple sectors. Adnan Saab here, I know how he is pushing all of us to get this issue done and scale up the next phase of this bond. So similarly, once we are done with this pilot phase, we will have a blueprint to scale this to other sectors as well. And not just on the scale, we can have this bond in other sectors such as in climate, healthcare, and education as well. We have very successful examples from our neighboring countries and around the world, which can be implemented and adopted in Pakistan also. So each of these instruments channel private investments towards public good, aligning investor returns with national priorities. So the immediate goal for us in Pakistan is to de-risk these markets, perhaps with sovereign or DFI guarantees, and then gradually evolve toward fully private participation as confidence and data maturity grow. Our PSIB pilot program is also backed by sovereign guarantee initially, but the idea is when we scale it up, we have a successful model to show it to investors, to international founders, philanthropic organizations, etc. And to make this shift sustainable, we also need to look at our capital markets. We need more deeper and more liquid market for these green and social finance instruments. I believe there are 4 foundational pillars to achieve that transformation. Much of what has already been discussed, specifically by Adnan Saab, but I would like to emphasize on that. We need to have a standardization in place such as Pakistan Green Taxonomy as a starting point. We need to develop a social taxonomy to define measurable social outcomes, which gives clear science-based definitions of what needs to be achieved, what are the objectives. Secondly, we need to develop pipelines of projects. And along with that, there's a role for regulator as well. We need to create regulatory targets and fiscal incentives that make this instrument commercially attractive for investors. And currently, we cannot differentiate from a traditional bond or a green bond or a social bond because there are no regulatory targets for banks, DFIs, other financial institutions or investors, or there are no incentives for investors to participate in these instruments. So we also need to encourage our investor base, such as pension funds, insurance companies, and corporates to allocate part of their portfolios to green and social assets. And this can only begin when we have some sort of mandatory targets for these investors to take part in these projects. And obviously, the last is to ensure credible, independently verified impact reporting to sustain investor confidence. I would like to give example of BOP again. We have already begun this journey through our partnership with AFD, which is the French State Development Agency for financing climate positive project. This partnership includes developing an environmental and social action plan, a gender plan, and integration of ESG standards into our core banking systems. So for us, we firmly believe this is not just compliance. It's about redefining banking for the next decade, where financial returns and development impact move together. So to conclude my discussion, Pakistan's development aspirations cannot be just met through public funding alone. It's very clear. The future lies in innovative partnerships where private investors, development institutions, and government work side by side to finance outcomes that truly matter. The Pakistan Skill Impact Bond is just the first step in that journey. If replicated and scaled across sectors, it can create a financing ecosystem that rewards measurable progress, not just spending. Once again, thank my sincere thanks to SDPI and UNICEF for leading this conversation, and to my fellow speakers and colleagues for their continued work in this space. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mateen, for the very helpful insights to the Bank of Punjab efforts on the different instruments, and especially the Pakistan Social Impact Bond. I think the challenge and the responsibility at the same time, again, is to demonstrate some efficient model and effective model that can deliver or that can demonstrate some low-cost solution and very high impact. And I think it is also good to see the growing recognition for the need to bring corporate, private sector, and other partners together to address this huge financing gap, may it be through alternate financing or may it through public financing. We heard from Dr. Ambrina also, and we heard from Pasha Saab as well about the opportunities and challenges which are out there. I would now like to invite Ms. Shumaila Rafaqat from Karandas to hear her perspective on Karandas' efforts on the Green Action Bond. It's up to you completely. Make yourself comfortable.
First of all, I'd like to congratulate STPI for bringing this conference to a university. It's bringing it closer to the youth. This is their future, and they should be part of the solution instead of recipients of it. So finally, good move out of the elite spaces and into the spaces where discussions should be taking place. So in terms of Karandas, most people are familiar with it, but we're an impact fund, and we operate in the space whereby we mobilize private finance to achieve development objectives. Many of those issues and those solutions have already been discussed. We work on those. In terms of Green Action Bond, this was launched last year. Karandas, in partnership with its subsidiary, Parvaz Financial Services, launched it. The size was 1 billion rupees. We raised that from private investors. It's 85% of it is already deployed. It targets sustainable agriculture, renewable energy, and clean transportation. We have a pipeline of 1.4 billion. It's a successful example of when you have the right broker in between that understands development and finance, you can get the right partners around the right instrument and launch it. It's not a surprise that Pakistan has launched it really late. Like the first impact bond was launched in 2007. Pakistan launched it in 21. That too, it was a sovereign bond launched by WABDA for a hydro project, hydro energy project financing. Karandas launched it in 2024. So we're a good 18 years behind the market. These instruments become difficult because there are no common entities in between that would bring all these players together and launch it. It's not that difficult. The way it started globally was that a pension fund wanted to invest in climate-focused facilities. There were none. World Bank launched it the next year. One of the recommendations right now from BOP was that we need pension funds and other investors. There should be regulatory policy that they should be encouraged to invest in these things. The problem is we don't have those facilities, and that's something Mr. Pasha spoke about, that we need bankable projects. When you develop these facilities, the bankers come. They want their return. So initially, it's very important that we have a guaranteed return to them that creates awareness on those topics. So they're buying into more climate-focused projects. They get a better understanding of it. We develop the mechanisms to successfully launch these things. The first facilities will not be perfect. They will not be the gold standard, but they will get sophisticated with time. Ours is also a vanilla product. It's not a retail bond, but with time, it will go towards that. Secondly, we're already talking about a development impact bond, looking at education, health, and gender economic empowerment, so financing for women entrepreneurship. So it's natural that once you launch a facility, more sophisticated models start coming in. In terms of what other alternative financing we've done, these instruments are becoming increasingly important because international financing for development is shrinking. So we have to look at private financing locally, uh, make those markets more efficient so we can rely on those and our development is more predictable. Human lives cannot wait for international politics to work in our favor. We have to make local markets, local financing work for our needs. So when Karandas was set up in 2014, the first thing we did was look at the financial architecture. Our main objective was financial inclusion for individuals and SMEs. And the financial architecture is not set up to service SMEs. So we set up Parvaz Financial Services that would be focused on SME financing. We set up InfraZamin that would be focused on infrastructure guarantees. We set up Credit Guarantee Company, NCGCL, that would de-risk financing to SMEs. And then we've also set up the Pakistan Microfinance Investment Company, which is a wholesale lending platform for microfinance. So these were essential entities, institutions missing in our financial architecture, which you need to service SMEs. Other than that, in terms of our own instruments that we've developed, so you have this financial architecture, but you need to bring in financial innovation so that others can invest in it. And that is basically a demonstration effect. We're not as big as the government, we're not big as the DFIs, but what we have the capacity and the knowledge is to develop demonstrable model of good financing that works for segments that are being ignored. So we brought in concessional finance for gender. We've been implementing that for 8 years, and we've worked out a model that works out for women-led businesses. What kind of financing would ensure that it absorbs properly, it's repaid so that they develop a credit history, and they grow to a level where they can go and borrow from traditional finance providers. In the green sector, we also developed a concessional finance facility, Greenfin Innovation, that supports climate solutions. And the idea is that you have to bring in SMEs supporting climate solutions, developing innovation, and getting the financing to scale it up. It can't be exclusive or left to large public sector projects that would do climate finance. Climate finance, basically climate change and adapting to it requires behavior change. And behavior change happens at societal level. So you need to have individuals, small businesses, all thinking about how to tackle climate change. You can't just leave it to the government to develop policies. These policies are supposed to give you a conducive space and environment to implement your ideas and solve these problems. But the private sector has to come forward, bigger and smaller entities coming up with solutions and doing their bit. So GFI was supposed to do that. We've developed blended finance instruments as well, because in such facilities, you need de-risking, you need markup subsidies if you want formal financial institutions coming in, and you need to bring these together so that they meet the need of businesses and market. De-risking has been very important. We also work with banks in spaces and sectors they're not willing to lend, mainly because there isn't enough data, there is no credit history, they don't have a credit risk model for those segments. So we share the risk with them so they go into those segments, those markets are developed. And once markets are developed, it runs on its own. I think a very good example was solar energy financing. The government came up with it. It came up with concessional loans, policies. The market is developed, it's running on its own now. So that's the kind of development support that's needed. In the end, I would close with some policy recommendations. It's good that, gender, finance, other human development issues are being recognized. You're seeing them in main government policy. So it is an issue that is being recognized. But also what needs to be recognized is that we need long-term investment in these policies, and government financing needs to be made available and predictable over the long term. You can't have these programs for 2 years or 3 years and not knowing if it would be available the next year. whatever gains you achieve in those 2, 3 years will be lost if there's no other financing source available. And that, what I fear, is going to happen to gender finance in this country, because the refinance and credit guarantee scheme has been stopped. It was funded by, development actors, and now with that funding, that shrunk and it's not available, so the government is not continuing with it. But that's our development agenda. It's our people. So if we want impact, we need to provide these policies and the funding behind it on a long term and on a predictable basis. Also, another area we could look into is lots of big corporates get tax credits on CSR, and that CSR goes towards marketing campaigns. It could be put to much more productive use, and we could have policies and indicators for what actually qualifies as CSR to get tax credit. So we need to go towards more efficient utilization of funding available, not only on the government side, but also on the private sector side. So thank you. That's all from my end.
The different features of different bonds that you're very nicely pointed to. I think two things come out very clearly. One of the sort of issue on sustainability of the reform and the policy and the fiscal reforms that the government is committed to, and how we can collectively see to those commitments and take this forward for the long-term impact and continuity. I think also you focused on the localization of solutions, which are localized and which are contextualized and which are financed from within the available resourcing. That's also pretty important. With this, and in the interest of time, I'll quickly move to Shamin Bashir from Pakistan British Asian Trust. Thank you, Shamin.
Thank you. I'll be very short, but everything has been covered more or less. So I'm trying to think what would add value that other people haven't touched upon. One is that I think what's really interesting or important to understand is outcomes-based financing is not a set of mechanisms. It's not, it's a mindset shift. So you have to ask the right questions and have the right intentions. And then everything else is a solution that can be provided, is it available, and all solutions should be, suit the local context. So for example, at its core, what outcomes-based financing does is it ties funding to results. And there's nothing like a financial incentive to change behavior. So let me take the example of the Pakistan Skills Impact Bond that we designed, but and we spoke to lots of different stakeholders and including training partners, because it's an employment program. At the end of the day, it's and a lot of training partners said, well, we're asked to train, so we train, right? So what is being measured and what they're asked to do is certify people in training. What we're saying is, we're going to the same training partners, or we will shortly, and tell them, here's a bunch of, here's some money, and we need X number of people in jobs. That's what we're paying for. So suddenly, a lot of things happen, right? So behavior changes at the implementation level. They start to think about, what will it take for me to get a person into a job, not get them a certificate, right? So suddenly, it's just about asking the right question and tying money to that. So we're also telling them now that here's a bit more money, because it will cost you more to put a person in a job. So we're funding you appropriately. We're going to support you in how you do this, but it's up to you what you do. So they feel more empowered. They're closer to the ground. They know what they need to do, especially if their funding is tied to it. So here's a little bit of money to get people into mobilized, trained, etc. But here's additional funding to actually put people into jobs, and we set targets, right? So we say, of course, I mean, these can be set in a way that they can be a little bit more achievable, a little bit nearer the status quo, maybe sort of a little bit higher as we move along. But let's say we say, if you get 80% people into jobs or 60% people into jobs, you get this kind of incentive, financial incentive. Currently, if we're being extremely optimistic, uh, all the funding into training is achieving you between 15 to 20% employment. I mean, that's just, waste of money. There's no value for money here. And that's why we're saying, we're going to set a target at say 60% or even 40% is double of the status quo, of a very optimistic number. So it's just about designing a program differently. If you want to attract different types of capital, and that capital requires different things. So private capital that requires a return, how should that return be measured? How should they? Well, it's based on how much risk they're taking. Well, how should they measure their risk? There has to be data, basic level data, which has to be a bit more rigorously sort of developed and made available so people can price their risk and say, okay, X amount of return is reasonable. The impact investment market in the world is in somewhere around 10 to 11 billion dollars a year. Obviously, it's not enough to fill the SDG gap, but it's not meaningless. I mean, that's a reasonable sum. But what also private capital does is it brings this kind of focusing on what does something cost? What does it take to deliver a certain impact? Because you have to show that so they can price or assess their risk. Any impact investor needs to know what is my return, even and what am I going to, how long will it take me to get my money back, and so pricing that risk. What else does private capital does? Just because it's private capital, it brings rigor into that project. It allows, so therefore it brings accountability. You can no longer design a project based on good intentions and we'll put X amount of money and then we'll all hope and work very hard to achieve certain results. So blended capital also, of course, it increases fiscal space, it brings more money, but it does this sort of two important things. That is, it brings rigor. So programs have to be designed more differently with more accountability, and it brings this. You have to measure those programs differently. You have to measure the results differently, because you have to report back, and there's a financial transaction that needs to take place. Funds have to flow differently. So there's value in bringing private money, not just because it's more money, but it's innovative. It brings innovation into your design, into your delivery, and it brings accountability, and it delivers better value for money all around. So let me give you an example of PSIB. Now, we've designed it in a way that we've used data from PSDF, the Punjab Skills Development Fund. We have good data, and their longitudinal data, we've used that as reference. And we've seen that even when we spend more, because it'll cost us more to measure better and measure more often. So you don't do a baseline and endline measurement in these programs. You have to measure all along, because payments are going maybe biannually, etc., based on results. The results are coming in maybe biannually or annually or whatever. So payments are linked. Investors are paid back. They can recycle that money for year 2. So that's how it works. So measurement has to go is more rigorous. It's more because the measurement of results is the payment trigger, so it's more frequent and etc. So it costs more. Private capital comes in, managing that transaction, the fund flows, etc., costs more. So the cost is probably higher, but the value for money is higher as well for the same program. So we've done an analysis where we've presented this and stand firmly behind it, that if currently you spend $100 and you train, sort of maybe 300 people and 20% of them get jobs, you're spending 150 You might be training fewer people, but more people are getting jobs. So the value for money is much higher with more effort into design, and so on and so forth. So outcomes-based financing, the essence of it is just to ask the right question and to design with a certain amount of rigor and accountability. That's when you are able to attract private sector capital, and different types of private sector capital. And the instrument, whether it's a bond or a guarantee or, all of that is a later stage thing. So you start with the problem that you're trying to solve. Who are you trying to solve it for? And and then how do you solve that? And how do you align? What kind of capital do you need? And how do you de-risk that capital, etc., comes later. And in our experience, at least, we've done some landscape studies now. We've designed this first program. There is nothing in our regulatory systems that really doesn't work for that. In India, we've been working in India with, launched 3 or 4 programs. The Skills Impact Bond that was mentioned before, that's also the British Asian Trust. It's, we raised about, I would say, about close to $50 million. And British Asian Trust is a mid-size, INGO. It attracts, it fundraises globally. And most of this money is from global trusts and foundations. We have almost, other than maybe Gates funding Karandas, I think, at some level, we hardly have any of that. 50 million was, and that's just something we raised. So why can't we bring that? Because we need to design differently, we need to sell differently, and we need to be more accountable for what, for the capital that we bring in. And hopefully, through this Pakistan Skills Impact Bond, the first time we're designing that way. We have designed that way. And the government is standing behind it. I mean, they're fully funding this, taking the entire financial risk, entire performance risk. And their objective is, let's just do this. Let's just learn how to do this. Right? So NAFTEX will learn how do we contract differently? How do we deliver differently? How do we fund differently? More with more accountability. On the other side, the implementing partners, whoever we deal with, will learn how to deliver against outcomes-based contracts. When somebody tells them, we'll pay you more, deliver more outcomes, they learn that. So these are sustainable things that they learn. That's why the government is funding them. If we can bring in other people, excellent. If we can't, they're taking on that responsibility for the longer term sustainability and this learning that it brings. I'll just stop there, and we'll have time for questions if possible.
Very much. For very brief question and answers, please raise your hand and briefly introduce yourself. And please point to the panelists that you would like to address the question to. Please.
My name is Ahmed Ali, and I work as an independent consultant. And I have also worked for 20 years with different government projects. My question is from Pasha Saab. As you mentioned that we should come up with the projects, bankable projects. So Karandar is already there. So how much Karandars can be supported? Because as I see, they're really performing really well. And I think FCDO is funding this. So how much the government of Pakistan can fund into this? Because this is a very successful model. And my question is for Shameen, also a second question, that do you think that it will succeed when the government has come in? I think it will fail.
Yeah, just to answer the first part of your question. So Karandas is funded. The social impact financing framework that I had mentioned. So Waqas Saab, who's leading Karandas, he's my partner in this, right? So there's a whole team that's been working on it. Shameen here, you heard Bank of Punjab, there are other development partners, uh, people who are skilled in their areas. So we ran with task forces. We invest in ideas. This is what this government is trying to do now. It's not about, and that's why I mentioned, forget about the funding part. What was just mentioned here by Karandas, we look for local solutions. Please don't mention funding. That's not the issue. I've been mentioning that, and my boss has been saying that as well. Let's look at projects. Let's come up with solutions. Very illustratively was explained right now by Shamin as well, that can be implemented. We are backstopping ₹1 billion just for this first tranche. So first tranche, and we will have learnings, Shamin, right, from this. And then we look at other sectors as well that BOP mentioned as well. And it's going to be a very transparent process. It went through a very transparent process on who should be hired to do this. So, yeah, to give funding to Karandas, that's not the solution. Karandas is already designing solutions and they're testing them. The government is not supposed to, and again, this is coming back to the old way of doing things. It has, but that's not the solution, because if you heard the solution is outcome based, right? So I'm familiar with their structure, and the government is as well. And Vakasa went from the government. The solution is, when they're designing these things, they'll be measuring them, they'll be reporting them, then we'll attract more funding. The government doesn't need to fund that. The government will gradually pull out from all of these structures, because the private sector has capital as well. So it's a different way of looking at things. It's a different prism, because if the government starts funding things, then we go back to the same thing, that there's going to be a tick box exercise, and we do not have that fiscal space in any case. The space created was by a funding partner that they got the funding through. Government didn't fund it. Sorry? Yeah, yes, that's what I'm saying. So they're funded, they're very well funded. What they're doing is they're coming up with new solutions. So here you heard two solution providers. Karandas is a huge solution provider who have subject matter experts embedded there. What I was talking about is, getting that mindset that, Shamin mentioned, aligned, that it's going to be now outcome based. And more funding is going to be channeled that way. And it's actually going to come from Pakistan as well. The money I mentioned from abroad, it's more expensive. You can blend it or you can leave it that way. But even for local pockets, it's going to be the same. They want to see outcomes. What's the result? Some of the things that I think was mentioned earlier about sort of, fiscal relief or for lenders or for investors, yeah, that should be looked into definitely. Because, and I'll give you an example, abroad, if you were to give money to like a UK charity, you get a relief on your tax return, right? But, and I shouldn't be taking names, but I will. Like if you give money to, let's say, Islamic Relief, right? UK charity, and if I decide I want to fund a project with my donation in Senegal or in Somalia to build schools, they'll send me photographs of how, and it has to be a girls' school. You can be that specific. And I want to see her graduate and get a job. They will actually track it all the way. So do you think I'll not recommend that solution to people? You should also fund it, right? So these are the innovative ideas that we should, and what you're telling me, we're writing them down, because these are things that we can test. These are things that will change the balance of money going in to actually providing longevity to these ideas. They may be in different structures because of the nature of the requirement. And just as a last thing, because I know I don't want to hog the mic on this, we talk about export-led growth. One of the sectors that there's a lot of students here who go towards IT, and there are certain companies here who only export IT, and they don't sell anything to Pakistanis on the IT solutions, because they get a lot of money from abroad, because we have the skills being developed. So that's another thing that I'm going to refer to people here as well to talk to these, and design solutions in that manner. As an example, if you know exactly what BAT is telling you, that I'm going to train 10 people who will be not just certified, but they will get a job, because my repayment is going to come from those 6 or 10 people, over a 10-year period. It doesn't have to be a कर्ज हंसना, because it becomes, हंसना वाली बात हो जाती है. That person जिसको आपने enable कर दिया, that becomes a productive asset of Pakistan, because that dollar earning or euro earning or renminbi earning coming into the country is driven by the little investment that we make today. It'll be recouped over a 10-year period, over a 5-year period, over a 15-year period for that sector, because usse hamari earning ho rahi hai, right? So it's a different way of looking at things. We will backstop it. As in backstop matlab ke hum usko guarantee kar dete hain, jaise iska kiya hai, right, for NAFTEC. Because we will take the risk on our people. We'll say this is our asset, and that's the thing. The first thing I mentioned, our asset is the people here. The jahan abhi log jo students aapke hain, if they are going into sectors or they're going into vocations that will earn them a higher livelihood living in Pakistan or going abroad and sending it back, I really don't care which side of the border they're on. They're sending money back for improving livelihoods, but they're also creating a model, a sustainable model, in itself. A long answer to a very short question.
What was the second part of your question?
Both side of the coin. The one side he is saying that private capital is more productive and more efficient. But whenever the government comes in, things get stalled, because of the outcome mapping, outcome mapping, process outcome. And planning commission is already here. So if I may be more radical, I would say that the whole PSDP should be invested in the private sector, but should be given to private.
So just briefly, we can take another question or comment so that the panelists can respond collectively. Any other question or comment, please? Shami, would you like to? Okay. Okay, sorry, we have an online question as well. Okay. So we have a question from a participant that given that provinces already allocate 20 to 25% of their budgets to education, yet we face a crisis of 26 million out of school children, 77% learning poverty, and where did the system fail? Funding doesn't appear to be the issue, it's the effectiveness. I think this has already been addressed in what Pasha Saab.
Shamin actually mentioned that.
Yeah.
You design these programs in a different way. You will start seeing the results.
Exactly.
One thing I should just add, because I'd mentioned that, we'll need to be patient with this, right? We are a very anxious nation for various reasons, unfortunately. And, we're very skeptical. Give it time. Just if you believe in change, then we'll have to take that little pain now. But it's not really going to be painful if we know what the end goal is, because it's our children who are going to be healthier. That one pillar is important for us, because that's the foundation of the education system. And then that leads to, a mind that thinks about the environment and the climate. Because agar uske paas rozgar bhi nahi hai, let's be very honest, there's a lot of the people that I meet, and I'm in the field a lot, previously as well, because I was doing stuff in agriculture. They're literally at the sustainable level, sustenance level. So they don't have time for these big ideas that we're talking about. But it's for us, when when the state has to come in and provide that backstop for a 10-year horizon or a 20-year horizon, because it'll take that sort of time to make that change. And it'll be seen in small measure, which third parties will measure and say, okay, I'm going to do more, right? So, whether it's a 50 million investment or a, billion dollar investment that, like the people sitting here and they were discussing how much money can be put in. The issue is it's the essence that we should go after.
Absolutely. Thank you very much to all the panelists.
Yeah, just a small question. Shumaila has mentioned about the longevity of some projects.
like the sustainability, we need to like plan longer. So is there any key solution or key thing that our projects are long enough, or we continue with the same projects? Because every time there is a change after every 5 years, and that project stops working, and then the next project. So is there any one key solution, or how can we deal with this? Because the impact is after a long time. Thank you.
Pasha Saab can answer on behalf of the government, but what I can say is the change in development sector was institutionalization, and Karan Das was the result of it. What FCDO normally did and continues to do was operate in project mode. Once the project ends, that's it, that's where the gains stop. So they created a local entity registered with SE News, and the funding is linked to that mission. It's a revolving fund. So that's a long-term commitment. You either institutionalize, and part of the government, they have to commit to long-term policies, no matter what government comes. So those have to be implemented. There has to be no turning back on those. So that's what's needed.
Much to the audience and to the very esteemed guest and the panelists for bringing a very unique, practical, inspiring perspective to the table. I think the way I look at it, and I mean, we need to be patient. We need to evaluate and assess impact with more concretely. And so that we are not towards the end, we are not grappling with the question that Dr. Sajid started off with, that do we have to trade off between debt servicing and human development, human capital investment? So I really hope that we are not stuck with that situation down the lane. We can see the reform efforts, we can see the very clear roadmap and the direction which the government of Pakistan has pulled together. And I would also like to congratulate the stakeholders, the government, for bringing all of this huge landscape of investments under one framework. Dr. Sajid, any final comment as we move to the closing remarks?
I'll just say thank you.
Okay, Anthony. आप कुछ कह रहे थे, मैं एंथनी को बुलाती हूँ।
मैं सिर्फ ये कह रहा था कि हमारी एक और प्लानरी स्टार्ट हो चुकी है 6 बजे की. So I was just telling that there is another plenary started at 6 and we have to be there. But very interesting discussion or very practical. But as I always say, thanks to UNICEF for this very excellent partnership and bringing this discussion on the table. But I think we have also be as a partner to be patient. This is just a beginning. It's a long way to travel from these rooms to the regulatory frameworks, to the policies, to the strategic guidelines, policies. So I think we look forward to working with UNICEF, continue. Adnan Pasha sir is always very kind and always listening. And I think from Karan Das, Professor Mustafiz Saab, Mr. Girma, if I can pronounce it right. Great. Thank you, Madam Chief SDGs Pakistan. आपका बहुत शुक्रिया जी सदर जुल्फकार साहब, आपका शमीन बशीर साहब. Number plates are changed. So big thanks to all of you, but we can have concluding remarks from the chief. Thank you. But I forgot one big thank to Dr. Razia actually for making all this possible. Khadija is also there. I think this would have not been possible without Dr. Razia and her team, and to all of you listening us very patiently. Thank you.
Three key takeaways that I have taken, and I think I feel I have to share with you because sharing is caring. Number one is the data issue we have talked about, including the physical space. We are in not a good shape. I can say we because I'm part of Pakistan. We are not in a good shape, and as it is particularly a country which is the fifth most populous country in the world. I repeat this once again because the impact in whatever way, human capital development, absolute number of children or whatever, is huge. So we have a collective responsibility moving that things further. Second, I think the discussion is about the need for investment in the social sectors, which is very important, moving some of the indicators that we have. I did not sub-count on UNICEF on those three pillars you have mentioned, stunting, learning poverty, and climate crisis, and others as well. I'm sure all the participants online and here also share with you that vision is, I think, great moving further. This investment should not be the traditional way, but it has to be a bit innovative, also incentivize private sector. That is what it is coming, bringing different entities together, government, private philanthropies, and others. We have a saying in Africa, in Asia as well. It requires a whole village to raise a child. I think it requires all of us to be together so that we have an innovative ways of moving further to improve the financing aspect. This financing has to be institutionalized. That's what my sister has said, because we are saying project, because we are involved on those kinds of things. But unless there is a long-term investment that is institutionalized, that's also based on systems, a strong education system, strong health systems that protect the health of the child, the mother, the entire society, is not going to help. So how we can institutionalize whatever we investment we are making is, I think, the key takeaway. The third element is the change we need at societal levels. Without changing the mindsets, the needs, the empowerment at societal levels, and without addressing the gender and the socio-cultural issues, whatever we are talking about is going to be a project which started today and end tomorrow. All these things need to be measured, as she has said. Finally, this measurement should be an impactful measurement that make Pakistan in a better way and putting ourselves in better world. Thank you so much.
Thank you.